Today the North Node is in the 11th degree of Taurus, and therefore the South Node is in the 11th degree of Scorpio. Taurus 11, a woman sprinkling flowers, refinement of the ego. As much as a flower is the resultant expression of sap rising and bud forming, similarly we can see the ego through a process of stages in its development, beginning with physical urges and maturing through emotional experiences towards full understanding. This process wins our full and loving, though possessive, attention as we nurture our own personal qualities, as does a gardener cultivating their flowers. This whole thing of cultivating one's ego, cultivating one's personal expression into the world, is studied here. And first say the obvious thing, the ego is considered good and normal by anybody with just a realistic sense of reality. We need the ego to separate us out as being different from other people. Without the ego, then there is no self-expression. We're like ants. And that's not what we are. We're not like that at all. But the whole idea of gardening the ego, like cultivating it, bringing it carefully into a better and better, fuller, richer, more beautiful expression of itself. Now this is a very interesting idea that I don't think a lot of people really focus on this. I've met people now who I knew when I was very young, my family for example, and so on, and they really don't have much change in their personality. They really haven't done very much to improve themselves. And that was typical of most people, certainly my parents' generation, but most people anyway. They don't do very much to work on themselves. They just assume that this is who I am, and I am like this, and that's that. Well, that's not only inconsiderate and rude, it's also silly. I mean, surely there's some evolutionary purpose in our incarnation into this life. But just to be what you're like, and if that upsets people, it's not your problem, it's theirs. I can see one side of that being a benefit, in that we don't want to be pulled by the strings of others. We want to be who we are. But the fact that we also have shadow aspects of our personality needs to be taken into account. And when you're just careless about the impact that your personality has on others, it's just rude. And therefore what we have here is the process discussed of how we can nurture our personality. And this is a very well respected process within Sufism. It is often said that the purpose of Sufi, its life purpose, is to develop a beautiful personality. And it's like that a little bit with gardening. We try to make our flowers beautiful. And here we have a woman sprinkling flowers. It's to do with concentration of the mind on developing a mature sense of self. It's to do with constructing a beautiful personality. And the implication is that caring is valid for its own sake. Now this is very interesting, because when we care for a plant, or indeed a pet, or indeed a child, that caring attitude is not to be seen as self-sacrificing or altruistic by the master. It is to be seen as very useful for the self through caring for things and other people, living things especially. We develop our own personality, therefore our own ability to know beauty and to know God. Without the refinement of the self, we can't refine our relationship with spirit. No way to do that. You just won't do that. The refinement of self is a requirement if you're to refine your knowledge of spirit. And it's very often the case that the opposite degree is informative, and Jones thinks very highly of this, Mark Edmund Jones. And in this case you have Scorpio 11, this is the South Node, a drowning man rescued. All for one and one for all. When we consider what it is about our race that distinguishes us as the rightful stewards of our planet, we perhaps would say our humanity. By this we mean that we have an inbuilt sense of responsibility for the well-being of others, even strangers, and if they are in peril, we would even risk our own safety for them. It's true, isn't it? Not everyone, but some of us would jump into a raging river to rescue somebody who's drowning. All the more so if it was a child, probably. And yet that's hardly suitable for a personal survival strategy. What we're seeing here is the sense of looking after your tribe as a collective survival strategy. And this is an aspect of humanity's normal way of being. The people that don't do this are too afraid by life to behave kindly. And when you see somebody behaving without kindness, understand that that's funded by fear. And they would be very angry with you if you said that to them, so don't say it. I did that last week and I enraged somebody. So, nevertheless, if somebody's not being kind and considerate and helpful, then it's because of fear. But if you're just a relatively okay person, then you tend to help others. And as much as we have the sprinkling flowers kind of image of trying to make things better and beautiful, here we have the other end of the equation where if something is in danger, we're willing to put ourselves in danger to rescue them. So that's the South Node, and what we have with the South Node is that which we find easily to access, that which we've developed already. So the fact is that we come from a lineage of our ancestors, our race, where we have learned that looking after other people who are in need is a good idea for our own personal development and for the survival of our species. That's what we do. We help each other out. It's so obvious, it's almost not a spiritual teaching. And it's much more obvious where I live in the country, in Ireland, where these country folk have been in danger for 500 years with one tyrannical leader or another. And they've worked out how to survive that and how to enjoy life nevertheless. And that's by helping each other out. It's really obvious that the more you help other people out, the more likely it is that they're going to help you out. So you reduce the stress of having to cope with life. There's always someone you can phone. And also you enjoy this process of collective development. So let's look at what Jones says on this topic. He's the one that really does piece the two together, and in this case it really works very well. It doesn't work in every case, I don't think. So, Taurus 11, a woman sprinkling flowers. This is a symbol of the soul's determination to give constant and tangible manifestation of its creative powers, and of its eagerness to pour itself into every potentiality of living. Isn't that wonderful? This is a symbol of the soul's determination to give constant and tangible manifestation of its creative powers, and of its eagerness to pour itself into every potentiality for living. Now, on the Scorpio side, a drowning man rescued, the South Node. This is a symbol of the soul's personal immortality and of its unabated eagerness in returning to the various phases of its experience again and again. Here is a consistent partnership between man and nature, so that the very accidents of circumstance can be counted on to serve him as long as he maintains his underlying enthusiasm of being. His consciousness has a continuity through his sense of responsibility for his own creative powers. Rather more subtle. But we're getting the same idea, is that the the state of soul consciousness that we aspire to be in, to live in that state of soul, where we're aware of ourselves as soul enacting through a body and through its personality. That's what we're looking at here. If you die saving a drowning man, so what? The soul is immortal. You know, there's a few moments of discomfort, but then you're the other side of the veil of death, and you've just saved somebody's life, and you've surrendered your own to do that. A noble bit of evidence of the soul's heightened state of being. And at the other end of the scale, we naturally water flowers, feed pets, take care of people that need help. And that's because that's what the soul does. And those people that are tuning in to that spiritual dimension of self, it's not as though the soul and the self are different. It's not like that. The soul and the self are just one and another part of a continuum. So when we tune into the highest part of our being, in other words, not driven by fear or scarcity or stress, that part which is free of all of that, then we find ourselves sprinkling water on flowers because they look a bit droopy. And that's why we do that. We garden, we take care of plants, because we tune into the soul. When you've gone through an experience where you've developed soul consciousness, whether that experience is short or long, you know, eventually you get to see that we are soul embodied, then you want to do different things. You want to take care of things more. And not just your things. I don't think taking care of your own kids is quite the same as taking care of a flower in somebody else's garden, for example. They're not quite the same thing. Different motivations. So when you actually find yourself just caring to help people, things, just make them a bit more so, save them from danger, boost their likelihood of growing into beauty. When you find you're doing that all the time, naturally, for no reason, nothing coming back to you apart from the joy of being in alignment with the soul and its creative urges to glorify life. When you're in that condition, then I think you can be quite pleased with yourself, because you've opened up to soul consciousness. And if you haven't got that as a natural thing, then this is quite a good practice to get into that state. We serve in order to learn how to love service for no reason, then actually it's great. You just love it. That's why you do it. Not for any thoughts of rewards in heaven. You just love it. It's great. It's a great activity to serve, especially when you're serving life itself.